Mr. Buster Flips!
Mr. Buster Flips! Mr. Buster Flips! Mr. Buster Flips!
Welcome everyone to this video on how to make quality introductions for your video. It's really exciting to be back and seeing you all in this virtual capacity at least. So in the essay that you're about to write, I want to kind of talk to you about how to make those introductions higher quality, because so far we've done those mini essays, we haven't done a proper introduction. So I just wanted to kind of remind you of the basic contents of a quality introduction. So the purpose obviously of an introduction is to provide the reader with background information so they can fully understand your thesis and what you're actually trying to do, right? So, so the reason why an introduction becomes important is because it's helping you to set up the topic and the subject of your essay to make sure that that's clear to the reader. Gives enough background for the reader to understand what you are actually writing about. And it clearly answers the prompt in a complete and clear way, uses the key language from the question, and it converts that into a thesis, and you're trying to set up that thesis and build it strong. So if you don't have a strong introduction, your reader might get confused, they might get lost, or they might even stop reading because they actually don't follow your point. I promise I will read to the end of your essays no matter what, but it's something to be aware of. That's why we want to have quality introductions. One thing that's important to remember is in your introduction, you should not introduce any evidence. The evidence comes in the body paragraphs, right? In the introduction, you're only introducing the material and the text and the ideas. You're not actually using any quotes or evidence in here. So let's look broadly at what the introduction should look like. And you can kind of think of it like this. I really like this, this kind of structure and this way of thinking about the introduction. And I have to thank Miss Morgan, my wonderful colleague, for kind of providing this graphic for me, because I like this metaphor in terms of how to think about the introduction. And you'll see when we get to the conclusion video that it's going to operate in the opposite order. So the point here is that we're going from broad worldly issues to more specific and eventually down to your very specific thesis, right? So if you, you can kind of think of the introduction as being introduced, divided into 3 parts. Each of those parts has 1 to 2, maybe 3 sentences, depending on how much you're writing. So in that opening part, which we often call the hook, we are introducing the topic and getting the reader interested in our essay, right? We're also making a kind of a broad world statement. Why is this topic important to you, reader? Why should you read this essay, right? And then you're narrowing that down in the second part and introducing the text that you're going to write about, the authors who have written those texts, and also maybe giving them some ethos in terms of their credibility. Why should we trust these particular people on these particular topics? So who are they, and kind of introducing that there. And then lastly, in your introduction, probably just 1 sentence, your thesis, which is the specific scope of the essay. This is what you're going to prove, right? And you can almost have in your head this idea, sorry, I'm clicking along here. In your head, this idea of kind of, you can have a kind of a frame in your mind that you're saying to yourself, when you finish reading my essay, I will have convinced you that, and then comes your thesis. Because that specific aspect is what you will convince the reader of as they go through your essay, right? Obviously, you wouldn't put you can put that in the writing when you're doing your first draft if you wish, if that kind of helps you, but then delete that when you do your proofreading later on. And obviously make sure that your thesis is using the language of the question by using the keywords from the question, that it's assertive, and that it's doing all those things to respond to the question that we have talked about before. So we've talked a great deal about claims throughout this year, so I'm not going to spend any time on claim writing in this particular video. You know how to write a thesis. If you don't, then check out one of my other videos. I'm also fairly sure that you are competent at introducing the text, the author, and giving them credibility, so I'm not going to spend that much time on that either. What I do want to spend a little bit of time on is how to, or what to put into that hook, the first part of your introduction, because we haven't really talked about that this year. And there's a great deal of pressure on that first sentence, right? Because it needs to introduce the topic and the subject of your essay, and it also needs to grab the reader and hook them on so that they want to continue reading your response. So it is important, and you do want to pay some attention to it. I personally write the hook last. When I've read my own response, I know what I'm arguing, and then I can kind of have a hook that makes sense and that introduces those ideas well. But the order of how you write things is totally up to you, depending on how you approach things. So what are some things that you can put into that hook? Your hook could have an interesting question of some sort. You might want to have, it could be a rhetorical question, or it can be just a question that you will explore as you go through the response. But keep it something that's going to interest the reader and kind of make them think, and something that you will cover in the essay, right? So it's relevant to your topic. It could be a statistic or a fact. So if we're doing our essay on juvenile justice, you might have a crime statistic of how many juvenile criminals are tried as adults, or something, some kind of fact or statistic that's going to be relevant to the scope of the essay. Not necessarily a quote, or in fact it shouldn't be like a piece of evidence, but it might be something that's relevant that you've come across as you have been working on this topic. It could be a definition. Kind of think about the topic of juveniles and who is a juvenile and that kind of thing, possibly. It could be an assertive statement, right? Not your thesis, but some kind of statement, we should never, like there's some kind of, not directly responding to the question, but in some way engaging your reader in that way. It could be a brief anecdote, right? A short story, or 1-2 sentence description of someone, what if someone, and give like a what if scenario or something that could get your reader interested in the topic. Or just an interesting simile, a metaphor that kind of exemplifies the point that you will make throughout your response. Or lastly, it could be a quotation, not a quote from one of the essays that you've read and that you're responding with, or one of the articles or the text, whatever it is that you are studying, but a quote from someone else that's more generic on the topic and that you can then connect to your work. So those are some ideas of things that you can put into that the initial hook in your essay before you go into introducing the texts and what the people are saying in the text, and then going into your actual thesis. So that's kind of how you're thinking of starting from the broad worldly, this is why this topic is interesting, to these are the texts that I've studied, to here is the claim that I'm making about the question based on those texts that I've studied. So you're narrowing it down. I hope that helps. If not, then let me know and we'll try to sort out some other ways to support you to get your introductions whoppingly awesome. Take care.